Hi, I'm Steph, and I'm the sole proprietor of this channel, From Scratchy with Steph. Tonight, I'm going to bring you my most controversial recipe ever. I don't think you've heard about it on the news. Go get a hammer. We're making chocolate chip cookies. First things first, we've got butter to melt. Have you ever had a recipe that calls for butter that is melted and then cooled? Who has time for that? I can't plan my life that far in advance. My workaround for that is to not quite melt the butter all the way. And in addition to that, I usually don't add all of the butter at once just because I know it's going to come out hot anyway and I'm probably going to get distracted. So just in case you push the button and then walk away, you're always safe. So I need a cup. I've got about 3/4 of a cup. And fun fact about butter, I ran a few experiments. It has about the same volume whether it's in its solid state or melted. So you can melt your butter either most of the way or all the way if you see a squirrel, and add a few chunks of solid butter until you get the amount that you need. The other thing I'm going to do is turn on the oven so that it's preheating while we're putting together our cookies. I melted my butter and now I'm just going to set it aside. It's like lukewarm-ish, but not offensively warm. And the reason that they want you to cool it, I don't know who they are, the Baking Commission. The reason they want you to cool it is because when you mix it with eggs, you don't want to accidentally start to cook your eggs. So next, while that's cooling off, we'll go with the dry ingredients. My first major beef with baking is that when you Google a recipe, you can always find a recipe online. You make it and it probably is going to turn out well. But can someone please explain to me why I can reduce the sugar of almost any baking recipe by 2/3 to a half of the sugar that the recipe calls for, and they are plenty darn sweet. Like, again, I want my toddler to be able to enjoy a cookie, and we can't do that if they are packed full of sugar. My second beef is, why isn't anybody trying to make these things even remotely healthier? So that's one thing that I try to incorporate in every recipe that calls for flour. I try to incorporate whole wheat flour. You can substitute 1/3, even up to a half, depending on what the final consistency is supposed to taste like, and it's not going to affect it's not really going to affect the structure or the taste. I have given these cookies to friends and family, and maybe they're liars because they think I'm nice and I brought them cookies, but they are actually surprised when I say that these have whole wheat flour in them. And I feel so much better about giving a cookie, eating 4 cookies, if I know that they're whole wheat. Like, you're supposed to have grains. Everybody knows that. So next thing we're going to add is our leavening duo. So here's the thing with the leaveners. That sounds like a family. As I mentioned, I kind of like a biscuity cookie, so I do half and half. If you like flat gooey cookies, no problem. Don't use baking powder, use baking soda, and just make sure that the total winds up the same. I've tried it both ways. It works out. Next magic ingredient, salt. So salt and sweet are like opposites on the color wheel. And if you add more salt to a recipe, you can take away a lot of the sugar, because when you have salt in the cookie, it makes the sweet taste a little bit sweeter. Just like salted caramel is like the perfect example. Put a little salt on there, all of a sudden it's like, blah, 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 blah. It's so sweet. So I will typically half the sugar and then double the salt. Call it a day. I watched a couple of specials on chocolate chip cookies and like these different techniques that professional pastry chefs used. One of the things that I took away that I thought was a really cool idea is using the little melty chocolate. Oh, here's a whole one. Whoops. this little melty chocolate instead of chocolate chips. So you can buy it in bulk or buy it in a bag, and all you have to do, take it out to the garage, beat the tar out of it. So all you're looking to do is make the size of the chocolates really varied. The wet ingredients for this recipe is where it really gets exciting. On the special that I watched, wait for it, the pastry chef smoked the butter. Smoked the butter. Put it in a little smoker with a little smoky tube and smoked the butter. I got this wild idea. Can I put liquid smoke in there? Answer, yes, you can. And it turns out really good. It does give it a smoky quality, and it doesn't affect the cook of the recipe per se, and it adds just like a little something. That's another reason to melt the butter, is that it helps the butter really coat all of the dry ingredients, but also if we're adding liquid smoke, I don't think it's enough to just cream it. Tonight I'm using a vanilla that my mother-in-law brought back from Mexico. It's super good. Thank you, Oma. Now that all of the liquids are in, we're going to add sugars. I want to get the sugars and the butter incorporated really well before I add in the eggs. If you don't want to risk the chance of there being an eggshell in it, just use your dirty butter cup. Dirty butter cup. And then you don't have to wash another dish, and you can really check out and see if anything fell in there. Okay, that looks pretty good. We're going to start incorporating the dry ingredients. And I forgot to mention when I was putting together the dry ingredients, that is one way that I think I've become more efficient, because right now we're just making cookies, it's late at night, I'm not in a huge rush other than I want to sit down and watch TV. But when I'm putting together a whole meal from scratchy, I need to have some standardization in the way that I prep things so that I can execute as quickly as possible without having a recipe fall apart on me. And one way I've done that is by grouping dry ingredients, wet ingredients. There are some recipes that does not work for. Madeline's is a good example. Things like cookies and cakes, in my experience, you can easily throw the dry together, throw the wet together. That'll actually save you quite a bit of time. If you're like me and you find yourself going back and reading, okay, what was the next step? Okay, what was I going to do? What? So that's one way that I've gained some efficiency. Now is the time to taste. If this is the first time you've made a recipe and you halved the sugar because you're not having it and you don't need those extra calories, then once you get everything together, give that batter a little taste. That way you know whether it's sweet enough. And it's not too late to add sugar. This isn't the ideal time, but it's not game over. So the dough is thoroughly mixed. All the ingredients are in. That's the best time to just go down your list of ingredients and do a little mental check to make sure that you added everything that you meant to. And it's usually not too late to correct it now if you made a mistake, or as I like to call it, made an innovation. Now we'll put our chocolate in. So if you try it, take a picture, tag me on Instagram, or leave a comment below. Tell me what you think about hammering out your cookies. I can kind of smell the liquid smoke, like in a good way. It just reminds me of sitting by the campfire, camping with your family. These are actually things I've never done. I'm indoorsy. Now we're ready for the bake-off. And the most important thing, no matter what cookie size you decide to make, is that your cookies on the sheet are the same size. The last little bit of excitement that I have for these guys is a bit of sea salt on the top. It's just enough to let you know it's there. I wish I could be so subtle. These are going to go in the oven at 350. I like these cookies to be as well done as they can be on the outside while still being super soft on the inside, even the day after when they've like completely cooled and it's time to deliver them somewhere or eat them all in a binge. Marks that I watch for that bake of a cookie are that the bottom is going to start to brown just a little bit and the top is not going to be jiggly at all. You can touch it and it doesn't quite spring back, but it doesn't leave a big indent either. And I realize that sounds insane, but every oven is different, and so I just want you to have the best trip possible on your Campfire chocolate chip cookies. They have a name now. I'm so excited. I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial on Campfire chocolate chip cookies. Hashtag trademark. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, why not subscribe? It's free. See you next Friday.